I stood at the edge of the runway, the hum of the jet engines vibrating through my chest. The sun was setting behind the tarmac, casting long shadows over the concrete. But none of that mattered, because all I could see was her. Sophia stood at the top of the stairs leading to the jet, arms crossed over her tailored white blazer. Her gaze was cold, calculating, colder than I'd ever seen it before. "Only family is allowed," she said. The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel, cutting deeper than I could immediately process. I laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "That's a joke, right?" I said, stepping forward. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "You're not on the list," she said flatly. "Only board members and family are invited on this trip." Board members. Family. My jaw tightened. "And what exactly am I, Sophia?" She sighed, the kind of sigh you give when you're tired of explaining something obvious. "Look, you knew this was a strategic business retreat. Don't make this personal." "Don't make this personal?" My voice dropped, and I glanced toward the jet's tinted windows. I saw the silhouettes of the people inside: board members, senior executives, people I had hired, people I had trained, people sitting comfortably in the company I had built, the company I created. Sophia's assistant stepped forward, already motioning toward security. The audacity of it almost made me laugh again. I took a step back as the jet's doors sealed shut, the engines roaring to life. My wife, my supposed partner, took off without me. I stood there, watching as the jet disappeared into the horizon. My reflection in the glass of the terminal showed a man I barely recognized, a man who had given everything and was left with nothing. No, that wasn't true. She thought she had erased me from her success. She thought she had won. But she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because if Sophia wanted me gone, if she truly wanted to wipe me from the empire we built together, I would do something even better. I would burn it to the ground. I remember the first time I saw Sophia. She wasn't the polished, ruthless business icon she is today, sitting at the top of an empire that bore my fingerprints but none of my name. Back then, she was scrappy, fighting to keep her failing tech startup from crashing into oblivion. She had a reputation, not for innovation, but for her ability to sell a vision. Sophia could talk, and investors loved her for it. She had the confidence of someone who belonged in boardrooms, even if she didn't fully understand the technology she was pitching. And that's where she was struggling. Sophia had influence. She had connections. But she lacked the foundation, the substance to back up the dreams she spun in investor meetings. And then there was me. I was a software engineer, not just any engineer. I had something people in the tech world had been chasing for years, a revolutionary algorithm that could change the industry. It started as a passion project in my apartment, just me and my laptop in a room lit only by the glow of the screen. An AI-driven automation system that could adapt in real time, learning and optimizing business processes without human input. It was brilliant, unstoppable. It just needed the right stage. Our paths crossed at a tech summit. I had scraped together the last of my savings to buy a ticket, spending money I didn't have just to be in the same room as people who didn't even know my name. Sophia, meanwhile, was there as a guest speaker, talking about the future of AI while her own company was circling the drain. She saw me before I saw her. I was in the demo hall, showing a group of skeptical attendees what hypersync could do. The moment my screen displayed its seamless adaptability, data streams updating in real time, entire business infrastructures recalibrating with zero lag, I felt her eyes on me. When the crowd thinned, she approached. "You made this." There was something sharp about her tone. Calculated. I nodded. "Yeah." She smiled, but not the polite kind. The kind that hinted at opportunity. "I think we need to talk." That conversation lasted for hours. She asked real questions, not just about the technology, but about me. What did I want? What was my endgame? "I don't care about fame," I told her honestly. "I just want this to exist. I want it to be used." That's when she said the words that would alter my entire future. "You have the brains. I have the resources. We be unstoppable together." It was the perfect pitch. She told me about her struggling startup, how she was on the verge of losing investor confidence. "If we merge your software with my infrastructure, we can redefine the industry." And I believed her. It wasn't just flattery, it was real. For the first time, I saw a path forward for my work that didn't involve me sitting alone in a dark room hoping someone took notice. So I said yes. The next few years were a blur of hard work, late nights, and blind faith. I poured my soul into refining hypersync, making it faster, smarter, more adaptive than anything the market had ever seen. Meanwhile, Sophia worked her magic, securing funding, building partnerships, and making sure the press knew about Hypersync. It was exhilarating. We weren't just business partners, we were equals. Or at least, that's what I thought. Somewhere along the way, late-night strategy meetings turned into shared dinners. Professional admiration turned into something deeper. Before I even realized it, I was in love with her. I saw her as the person who believed in me when no one else did. She championed my work, fought to bring it into the world. And in return, I trusted her completely. We got married before Hypersync even took off. It felt natural, like we were sealing our commitment not just to each other, but to our vision. Hypersync wasn't just a company. It was our child, the thing we built together. The thing we were going to share forever. Or so I thought. At first, it was small things. Sophia started taking press interviews alone. If I showed up, I'd be standing just off camera, or worse, reduced to a quick mention as the lead developer. The investors started associating Hypersync solely with her. Sophia's vision is revolutionary, they'd say. Sophia's leadership is changing the industry. And in meetings, she would subtly correct people who referred to Hypersync as our company, shifting the language to imply that it was hers. We both know you're not comfortable with the spotlight, she'd say, flashing that effortless smile. Let me handle the PR. I didn't push back. What was the point? We were a team, weren't we? If Sophia being the face of the company made things easier, why would I care who got the credit? But looking back, that was the moment the balance started to shift. And I should have seen it. At first, it was easy to ignore the changes. Success does that. It blinds you to the little details, the subtle shifts and dynamics that don't seem important until it's too late. When we were building Hypersync from scratch, there was no room for ego, no space for power struggles. We were two halves of a whole, working toward the same goal. But once the money started rolling in, once the investors started throwing millions at us, everything changed. Or maybe she changed. It was gradual, the kind of thing you only notice when you look back and realize how far you've drifted from the shore. Sophia started taking on more responsibility, and I let her. It made sense. She was the face of the company, the one who charmed investors and closed deals. I was fine being in the background. But then the language changed. At board meetings, she stopped referring to Hypersync as our company. It became her company. Hypersync is a product of my vision. When I started this company, I knew we were going to revolutionize the industry. I'd sit there, forcing a smile, convincing myself that it didn't matter, that she didn't really mean it that way. But it wasn't just words. She started making executive decisions without me. A major partnership with a government agency? I found out through a press release. A new expansion strategy that shifted focus away from my original vision? She discussed it with the board before consulting me. The company's branding was suddenly centered entirely around her. The official website no longer listed me as co-founder, just as lead developer. I confronted her about it once, sitting in our sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city. Sophia, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, we built this together. Why do I feel like I'm being pushed out? She sighed, barely looking up from her laptop. You're overthinking it. Investors like a strong leader, someone they can rally behind. The public likes a face they can recognize. We both know you're not comfortable with that. I frowned. That's not the point. The point is you're erasing me from the story. She laughed, shaking her head. Don't be dramatic. Everyone knows you're a part of this. That was a lie. The world didn't know because she had made sure of it. Then came the share transfer. Sophia called it a strategic move. We need to consolidate our power, she had said, lounging on the couch in our penthouse, sipping wine like we weren't talking about the future of my life's work. The board thinks it would be more stable if all major shares were under one name, fewer legal complications, fewer risks when making bold moves. I frowned, my gut twisting. What risks? She waved a hand dismissively. Nothing serious. Just a formality, really. It won't change anything between us. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. I should have seen it. I should have questioned why she was suddenly so eager to merge everything into her control. But I didn't. Because I trusted her. Because I was a fool. So I signed the documents. I signed away my stake in the company, my official ownership, my control. Sophia smiled as she kissed me on the cheek. See? We're a team. This just makes things cleaner. I remember holding the pen a moment too long before setting it down. Something in the back of my mind told me I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. And I had. After that, everything spiraled faster than I could stop it. Sophia grew bolder. She started hosting private executive meetings I wasn't invited to. When I asked her about them, she shrugged. It's just business strategy. You don't like boardroom politics anyway. The next week, I found out that my personal projects within the company were being reassigned to new leads. My teams were being told to report to her directly. Then came the final blow. The company was preparing for a massive global expansion, an event that would be the biggest milestone in Hypersync's history. I should have been front and center, one of the key people leading the charge. Instead, Sophia scheduled a private jet trip for the board, an exclusive strategy retreat. I wasn't invited. I only found out when I saw the itinerary sitting on her desk. I confronted her. You didn't even tell me about this trip. She barely looked up. I didn't think you'd be interested. It's more of a PR move than anything. You've always hated that stuff. I stared at her, the realization settling like a weight in my chest. I co-founded this company, Sophia. She sighed, clearly bored with my objections. Yes, and you'll still be here when we get back. What's the big deal? The big deal was that she had made it perfectly clear where I stood. The big deal was that she had already decided I was expendable. I clenched my fists. I gave up everything for this company. For you. Finally, she looked up, but there was no regret in her eyes. No hesitation. Just that cool, detached confidence. And it's appreciated, she said. But things evolve. You can't take this personally. That was the moment it all crystallized. The moment I stopped fooling myself. She wasn't my partner anymore. She wasn't my wife. She was my enemy. And soon, she would realize just how much damage I could do. The moment I stepped onto the tarmac, I knew something was wrong. That strange, hollow sensation in my gut, the one that tells you when the ground beneath your feet is shifting, was already there before I even saw her. The heat of the engines pulsed through the air as I walked toward the jet. Executives, board members, and senior engineers I had personally mentored were already seated inside. People I had built this empire with. It was supposed to be a celebration, the company's biggest expansion yet. A milestone that belonged to both of us. But the moment I reached the bottom of the stairs, Sophia was there. Standing at the top, arms folded, looking down at me with that cool, unreadable expression. I frowned. You coming down? She didn't move. Instead, she gave me a small smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Only family is allowed. It took a second to register. A second too long. I let out a short laugh because surely this was a joke. What? But she didn't laugh with me. She didn't even blink. You're not on the list, she said, her tone even. It's a private retreat. Strictly for board members and family. Something in my chest turned to ice. The company I built. The product I created. The legacy I poured my life into. And I wasn't even considered part of it anymore. I glanced at the others already inside, people who used to answer to me. People who once called me their mentor. Their leader. Some of them wouldn't even meet my eyes. And that's when I knew they had all known about this. I took a slow step back, scanning Sophia's face for any hint of regret. Any sign that she was second-guessing herself. There was none. You're serious? I said quietly. She sighed. This isn't personal. The board just thought it would be best if we moved forward with a more streamlined leadership structure. A more streamlined leadership structure. I wanted to ask her when she had decided to become the enemy. When exactly she had gone from being my partner to being the person who had engineered my removal from my own company. But I didn't. Because I already knew. I could have fought it. Could have argued. Could have demanded she tell me the real reason she was doing this. But I didn't. Because in that moment, standing at the base of that jet, hearing the distant hum of the engines, feeling the heat of the sun on my face, I saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just a business trip. It was a statement. A declaration. Sophia wasn't just excluding me from this trip. She was excluding me from everything. She was rewriting history. Erasing my name. Making it so that when the story of Hypersync was told, I'd be nothing more than a footnote in her success. And if I fought her here, if I made a scene, if I begged, then I'd be exactly what she wanted me to be. A desperate man clinging to something that was no longer his. So I made a decision. I took a slow, measured breath, forcing my pulse to steady. Then I stepped back. I nodded once, keeping my voice even. Understood. Sophia blinked, just for a fraction of a second. She had expected me to react differently. Expected me to fight. To argue. To beg. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I turned away, walked off the tarmac, and listened as the engines roared to life behind me. I didn't look back. Not when the wheels lifted off the ground. Not when the jet disappeared into the sky. Not when my entire world was supposedly leaving without me. Because she thought she had one. She thought she had finally cut me out completely. She had no idea. She had just handed me the ultimate revenge. By the time I reached my car, my mind was already working. Sophia had spent years convincing herself that she was the true mastermind behind Hypersync, that I was just a technical footnote in her empire. And because of that, she had made a fatal mistake. She had forgotten who built this company from the ground up. She had forgotten who created the foundation that held it together. She had forgotten that the core of everything, the software, the security, the very system that powered Hypersync, was still mine. And now I had nothing left to lose. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I drove away from the airstrip. She had taken everything from me, my company, my name, my legacy. But there was one thing she didn't take. Something she didn't even realize I still had. The source code. The security keys. The backdoor I had built into the system from the very beginning. A safety measure. A kill switch. Something I had installed in the early days, when I still believed we were in this together. She thought she had shut me out. She thought she had erased me. She thought she had won. But now, for the first time since this all began, I was no longer playing defense. Now I was going to take everything back. Not just my company. Not just my legacy. I was going to erase her empire, brick by brick, line by line, until there was nothing left but ashes. I didn't go home that night. There was no point. The penthouse Sophia and I had bought together after Hypersync's first billion-dollar valuation felt more like a museum now. A carefully curated display of her success where my presence had been reduced to a footnote. No, I needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere quiet, where I could think, where I could plan. So I drove to the one place that was still undeniably mine. The private development server I had set up years ago when Hypersync was still just a dream. No one knew about it. Not Sophia. Not the board. Not even the engineers who had worked under me. This was my failsafe. And tonight, it would become the beginning of her downfall. Hypersync wasn't just another piece of software. It was an ecosystem, a self-sustaining automation network that powered everything from high-frequency trading firms to global supply chains. Its security layers were tighter than any government system. It was designed to be impenetrable. But there was one flaw. A flaw I had built in from the very beginning, back when Sophia and I were still partners. When I still believed in us. I had written a private failsafe into the source code, not as an act of paranoia, but as a safety measure. A way to reclaim control if anything ever went wrong. It was buried deep, hidden beneath layers of encrypted pathways, masked as an unassuming, rarely accessed subroutine. To anyone else, it looked like a harmless fragment of forgotten code. But to me, it was a kill switch. I sat down at the terminal, the glow of the monitor reflecting off the dark glass of the server room. I logged in. The familiar hum of the system's interface came alive, the blinking cursor waiting for input. She thought she had locked me out of my own empire. She was wrong. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as I accessed the master framework. First, I ran a diagnostic. The numbers flashed across the screen. Hundreds of servers. Millions of active users. A network worth billions. And all of it, every line of code, every data stream, still tied to my code. Then I executed the first command. A simple one. A security reconfiguration. On the surface, nothing changed. Hypersync continued running as usual. But beneath the surface, every executive-level access key was revoked. No one, not Sophia, not the board, not a single top-level employee, could log in or make any critical system changes. Except for me. I leaned back, watching as the system reset itself. She wouldn't notice immediately. Not yet. But soon. Very soon. She would wake up to a world where she was no longer in control. My phone rang at 6:07 a.m. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, I picked up, just to hear her voice. Aaron. Sophia's voice was sharp and frantic. What the hell did you do? I smiled. It was satisfying, hearing the cracks in her usually composed demeanor. Good morning, Sophia, I said casually. Something wrong. Don't play games. She snapped. The system is rejecting all executive logins. The entire board is locked out. The engineers can't override it. I know you did something. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the silence between us. Then I said the words I knew would break her. Sorry, Sophia, but only family is allowed. Dead silence. I could almost picture her standing in some luxury resort, phone clenched in her hand, her carefully constructed world starting to crack. You. She started, but I cut her off. Let's get one thing straight, Sophia, I said. My tone dark now. You didn't build hypersync. I did. You didn't design the system. I did. You don't own it. I do. You think you can take it back? She hissed. You think you can win? I laughed. Sophia, I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. I already did. Then I hung up. By the time Sophia landed, it was too late. Hypersync's security system had been completely overhauled. All critical operations required my biometric authentication. The board was in shambles. Investors were panicking. And Sophia, for the first time, realized what she had done. She had undermined me. She had betrayed me. She had shut me out of my own empire. But in doing so, she had forgotten something far more important. I was the one who had built this from nothing. I knew every line of code, every system flaw, every hidden failsafe. And now? Now I was going to burn it to the ground. I didn't go back to sleep after hanging up on Sophia. I just sat there, watching as the missed calls piled up on my phone. Her name flashing over and over like a desperate heartbeat. By 7 a.m., the call stopped. Not because she had given up, but because she had finally realized the truth. This wasn't just a system glitch. This wasn't something her engineers could patch in a few hours. This was the beginning of the end. And I had written the script. At exactly 8:15 a.m., I got a text. Not from Sophia. From one of my old engineers. They're panicking. The board is losing its mind. She's trying to call an emergency meeting, but no one can access anything. What did you do? I smirked, typing back slowly. Just reminding them who built the system. Sophia was smart. I had to give her that. She didn't waste time. She called in every expert she could find. Top-tier cybersecurity specialists, former government encryption analysts, even a few of my old team members. They all ran into the same wall. The lockout wasn't just a simple admin-level restriction. It was a deep structural override, something embedded so far into the system that even if they tried to rewrite access pathways, the code would rebuild itself in real time. Hypersync was rejecting her. At the DNA level. And there was only one person who could unlock it. Me. By 10 a.m., my phone rang again. Not Sophia this time, one of the board members. Aaron. The voice was strained but carefully measured. We seem to have encountered a technical issue. I assume you're aware of it. I smiled. I might be. We need your help. There it was, the first crack in their arrogance. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch before I answered. Funny, because just last week Sophia made it very clear that I was no longer a part of Hypersync. That was a misunderstanding, the board member said quickly. Save it, I said coldly. You locked me out of my own creation. You let her erase my name, strip my influence, humiliate me. And now you want my help? Long silence. Then finally. What do you want? I smiled. Nothing yet. Then I hung up. By noon, she finally cracked. She didn't call this time. She showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. Sophia wasn't the type to beg over the phone. She needed to be in control. She needed to stand in front of someone and make them see her authority. Except this time, she didn't have any. I opened the door to find her standing there in a sharp designer suit. Impeccable as always, but there was something different in her eyes. For the first time since this war started, she looked afraid. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. To what do I owe the pleasure? She exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. Let me in. I didn't move. No. Her eyes flared. Aaron, I don't have time for games. I smiled. Neither do I. She hesitated, then forced herself to soften her tone. Look, she said, trying to sound calm. We can fix this. We. I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Last time I checked, there was no we anymore. You made sure of that. Her lips pressed together. I made a mistake. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Oh, now it's a mistake? When you left me standing on the tarmac like an outsider? When you stole everything I built and acted like I never existed? Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. I did what I had to do for the company. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. Then do what you do best. Sophia, talk your way out of this. Convince the board you've got it all under control. Because as far as I'm concerned, this isn't my problem anymore. Her breath hitched, just for a second. She was losing control. I leaned in closer. Hypersync was mine before it was ever yours, I said. And now? You don't own it anymore. Her eyes darkened. You can't do this, she whispered. This is my life, Aaron. I tilted my head. Funny, you didn't care about that when you erased my life from the company. She swallowed hard. For the first time, she didn't have a response. So I stepped back, keeping my expression cold. Consider this your first lesson in losing everything. Then I shut the door in her face. By evening, the fallout had spread. Investors began pulling out, terrified of the instability. Customers started losing access to hypersync services, causing major corporations billions in potential losses. News outlets began reporting on the internal crisis at Hypersync. Headlines like, Tech giant Hypersync faces unprecedented meltdown. CEO Sophia Callaway under fire as system crash costs millions. Behind-the-scenes drama. Was Hypersync's true creator pushed out? Sophia was getting hammered from all sides. And the best part? There was no way out. Because the only person who could fix it was me. And I had no intention of saving her. I woke up the next morning to chaos. Not mine, hers. Sophia's empire, the one she had spent years building while erasing my name from it, was burning to the ground. And she knew it. Hypersync's stock price dropped 30% overnight. By mid-morning, it was down 50%. The companies that relied on Hypersync's AI were feeling the impact. Logistics networks were failing. Banking systems were glitching. AI-driven trading firms were hemorrhaging millions because they couldn't access the software's real-time market predictions. And through it all, I sat back, sipping my coffee, watching the world slowly realize the truth. Hypersync wasn't Sophia's creation. It was mine. And without me, it was collapsing. By mid-morning, my phone rang again. The board. They must have finally realized that Sophia wasn't in control anymore. I let it ring a few times before answering. Gentlemen. My tone was smooth. To what do I owe the pleasure? We need to talk, came the clipped response. This has gone on long enough. I smiled. Has it? You're going to kill the company. Another voice snapped. Do you have any idea how many billions are at stake? I glanced at my laptop screen, where Hypersync's stock price was flashing in red, already down another 15%. You'll have to be more specific, I said. Are you asking for my professional expertise, or just yelling for the sake of it? A long pause, then a frustrated exhale. We need your help. There it was. The first taste of surrender. I tapped my fingers against the desk, letting the silence stretch before answering. Funny, because last week Sophia made it very clear that I was no longer a part of Hypersync. That was a misunderstanding, the board members said quickly. We save it, I cut in. You let her erase my name, strip my influence, humiliate me. And now that everything is falling apart, you want my help? The silence stretched. Finally. What do you want? I smiled. Nothing yet. Then I hung up. By noon, my apartment intercom buzzed. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Sophia. She was running out of options. And I was the only person left who could stop the bleeding. I took my time answering the door. Let her stew in her own panic for a few extra seconds. When I finally opened it, her mask of control was gone. Her breathing was sharp, her hair slightly out of place. And her eyes, they weren't angry anymore. They were scared. We need to fix this, she said immediately, stepping into my apartment like she still had authority over me. I leaned against the counter. Fix what? The system. Her voice sharpened. Whatever you did, you need to undo it. Why would I do that? Her jaw tightened. Because the entire company is falling apart. Her voice broke slightly. This is bigger than just you and me, Aaron. If you keep this up, Hypersync will be finished. I gave her a slow, measured look. Good. Her breath hitched. That was the moment it truly hit her. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't waiting for a deal, a payout, or an apology. I was watching her empire collapse and enjoying every second of it. You don't understand, she said, trying to recalculate. This will cost you too, Your reputation is tied to hypersync. I chuckled. My reputation? You mean the one you erased from every press release, every article, every award? The one you took credit for? She flinched. I stepped forward. I don't care about hypersync anymore, Sophia. I care about watching you lose everything you stole from me. Her lips parted, but no words came. Because now, for the first time, she understood. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about money. This was personal. And there was no fixing it. By evening, the headlines were everywhere. Hypersync faces unprecedented crisis as CEO Sophia Callaway fails to regain control. Investors flee as Hypersync stock crashes. Was Hypersync's true genius erased from history? And the best part? The media was finally digging into the truth. Interviews with former employees. Old articles mentioning my name before it was scrubbed from the company's history. Whispers about how maybe Sophia wasn't the real mastermind after all. By midnight, Hypersync had lost over 60% of its valuation. And Sophia? She was finished, not just as CEO, as a legend, as a business icon, as the woman who once commanded respect in every boardroom in the country. Because now the world knew. She wasn't the woman who built Hypersync. She was the woman who lost it. And I was the man who made it happen. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and texts. Not from Sophia. From the board. From investors. From the press. Hypersync stock had cratered overnight, down over 70% since the lockout. Sophia was being torn apart in the media. The same reporters who used to hang on her every word were now picking apart her failures. Was Sophia Callaway ever truly the genius behind Hypersync? Industry insiders suggest Aaron Carter was the true architect of Hypersync's success. The board held an emergency meeting at 7:00 a.m. At 7:45, the announcement hit the newswires. Sophia Callaway had been officially removed as CEO of Hypersync. At 8 p.m. that night, my phone buzzed. A text. From her. Meet me. Langford Hotel. 10 p.m. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to bother entertaining it. Then I smiled. And went. The Langford's rooftop bar was nearly empty when I walked in. Dim lighting. Soft jazz humming through the speakers. She was already there, sitting at a corner booth with a glass of red wine in front of her. She looked different. Not broken. Not defeated. Just tired. I took my time walking over, watching as her gaze lifted to meet mine. Didn't think you'd come, she murmured. I slid into the seat across from her, resting my arms on the table. I was curious. She let out a soft, humorless chuckle. Curious about what? I studied her for a moment, taking in the tension in her shoulders, the faint dark circles under her eyes, the way she wasn't wearing the armor of control anymore. How it feels, I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. How it feels. I leaned in slightly. Losing everything. Her breath hitched. For a moment, I saw the flicker of the old Sophia, the one who would have fired back, who would have met that challenge head-on. But not this time. This time, she didn't have a defense. Instead, she looked down at her glass. You were always the smarter one, she admitted quietly. I just talked better. I smiled faintly. You stole from me, Sophia. You erased me. And you expected me to just accept it. She swallowed hard. I thought you wouldn't fight back. I laughed softly. That was your first mistake. Her hand tightened around the stem of her glass. And your first mistake? Trusting you. A long silence stretched between us. Then, softly, she said, I never stopped loving you, you know. I didn't react, didn't flinch, just watched her. Because now I could see it, the last attempt, the last manipulation, trying to pull me back in, trying to make me feel something for her again. But that part of me, the part that once would have believed her, was already dead. I stood up, sliding my hands into my pockets. I stopped loving you the second you told me I wasn't family. Her breath caught. I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. Not when she whispered my name. Not when I heard the sharp hitch of her breath as she fought to hold back tears. And as I stepped out of the hotel into the cool night air, I knew one thing for certain. This was the last time I would ever see Sophia Callaway again. Sophia didn't reach out again after that night. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Because what was left to say? She had spent years crafting her own mythology, convincing the world that she was the mastermind behind hypersync. And for a while, the world had believed her. But now? Now she was just a cautionary tale. The headlines wrote themselves. From CEO to scandal, the fall of Sophia Callaway. Hypersync implodes. Was it built on lies? Once a tech icon, now a pariah. The press was brutal, relentless. Every interview she had given, every moment she had taken credit for my work, every deal she had made while pushing me further into the background. It was all under the microscope now. Former employees came forward. Investors publicly distanced themselves. Even her most loyal supporters started walking away, realizing that aligning with Sophia Callaway was a sinking ship. And the final blow? Hypersync's board of directors had voted her out. She was officially removed from the company. She wasn't just out of power. She was nobody. While she was fading into obscurity, I was doing the opposite. 2 weeks after her removal, I announced something new. Not a company revival. A rebirth. SyncForge. A new AI-driven platform, sharper, faster, smarter than anything Hypersync had ever been. And the best part? I had spent the past few weeks reaching out to every loyal team member Sophia had discarded. The developers, the engineers, the real minds behind the software, the people she had undervalued and overlooked. And they had all come back to me. Not for money, not for status, for revenge. When SyncForge launched, it was an immediate success. Investors who had pulled out of Hypersync came to me first. Tech publications that had once praised Sophia were now writing about me. The true genius behind Hypersync emerges with SyncForge. Aaron Carter proves he was always the architect of Hypersync's success. And Sophia? She was watching it happen. I knew she was. Because this wasn't just a personal betrayal for her. This was her greatest fear coming true. She had spent years making sure the world only knew her name. Now the world was forgetting her entirely. A week later, my phone rang. Sophia. I stared at it for a moment. Then I picked up. Aaron. Her voice was thin, shaky. I need help. I smiled. Sorry, Sophia. I exhaled slowly. Only family is allowed. Then I hung up. And just like that, I ended it for good.